Hope today you did come to celebrate Mother's Day and to celebrate, more importantly, the mothers for whom this day is set aside to honor. We thank God for our mothers. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. We thank God for who they are. But they mean more to us than just those that brought us into this world. Our mothers played a great role in who we are and where we came from and what we're all about. They're the ones who taught us when we were young and gave us the virtues and the ethics that we live by. And we want to just spend a little bit of time this morning concentrating on who our mothers are and what it means to cherish our mothers and to love our mothers on this particular day. I want to read today out of Proverbs chapter 31. In verse 10 of Proverbs 31, Solomon, the king, is writing and ending up the book of Proverbs actually, and he's talking about a good woman, a virtuous woman. We know he's talking about a wife and a mother because Solomon talks about her husband and her children, so it's her family, and how a virtuous woman will respond to her family. I think it's kind of apropos for Mother's Day, so we want to read that. Proverbs chapter 31, starting in verse 10. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ships, she bringeth her food from afar. She riseth up while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good, her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry, her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth girdles to the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Motherhood is something that you have to be a mother to fully understand. I can guarantee that. Speaking from the concept of a man, I can see what my wife has been through. I know what my mother did for me, and I see how things were passed down through the generations. So I have a concept of the extent of motherhood. I've never felt the inclinations of a mother or been through the things that require to become a mother. I know those things, but I thank God that God instilled in us characteristics and virtues and attributes to make us who we are, and for the ones that he brought to the place where he could bring them into motherhood and allow them to be a great witness and a great example, a great nurturer to their families. How important is the concept of a family? God created the heavens and the earth in Genesis chapter 1, and in the very beginning God created everything man was going to need to have dominion over the earth. And then the last thing God created was, with his own hands from the dust of the earth, God created a man, and he breathed the breath of life into that man, Adam, and he became a living soul. And then God said, it's not good that the man should be alone, but I want to make for him a helpmeet. And he put Adam to sleep, took a rib from Adam. From that rib he created another being, and he placed that rib into that being, breathed the breath of life into that woman, and she became a living soul. God never had to create another human being from the ground, because he said to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. That's what God gave the commandment to. You are now bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. And Adam said, she'll now be called woman, for she was taken out of the man. In Matthew chapter 19, when they talked to Jesus about divorce, Jesus said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, like Adam said in Genesis chapter 2. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. And as far as divorcement was called, Jesus said, from the beginning, God from the beginning didn't see it that way. He intended for that union of that man and that woman to be forever. He also said to them in the Garden of Eden, like we talked about a minute ago, be fruitful and multiply. That can only happen in the union of a man and a woman. That's the only way that can happen. There is no other way, though people in this world we live in today want to try to pervert every good thing that God ever laid down, and they want to try to make things different than God ever intended. And I don't want to go into all that this morning, but I simply want to say God instituted marriage to be between a man and a woman, and the procreation, the birth of the children, to form a family for that man and that woman can only be accomplished with a man and a woman. That's the way God intended it. Adam and Eve had children, their children had children, their children had children, right on down through the generations. I was looking this week at my family history, a little bit of my family history, and putting together a spreadsheet that I have, and I was going through some of my ancestors. And I can trace my family history here in South Carolina and all back 400 years to the late 1600s. I can trace my family history back. And I know that back in the 1600s, when the first of my dad's mother's side of the family, the Merles, when they first came to South Carolina in 1695, they had no concept that I'd be standing here this morning. This church didn't exist. Mount Pleasant didn't exist when they first came here. But they had children, and those children passed down children, and those children passed down children. Until finally, 100 or so years ago, my grandparents were born, and my 4 grandparents, 2 sets of grandparents, had 2 children, and those 2 children came together as a husband and wife, and out of that union I was born. I met my wife, and out of that union 5 of our sons have been born, and out of those unions that they've had, 3 other children have been born. We passed down our DNA. So I want to look for just a second at the advent of motherhood, if I can. Do something a little different than I think I've ever done before, but I kind of want to try to make a point this morning, if I can, when we're talking about mothers. As I said before, it takes a man and a woman to produce and to conceive a child. Without going into all the biology, I think you understand the biology of it. But when a man and a woman, when a husband and a wife come together the way God intended, each is going to contribute some portion of biological material, some chromosomes, 23 chromosomes to be exact in a cell, from each one together to make the cells, the 46 chromosomes that is going to make up that new life that's going to be born. When that occurs, when life is conceived at that point and that embryo is formed, that child is a combination of both parents. It cannot ever come about, a child can never be born from just the work of one parent. It has to be from what was contributed by both parents, and it contains some of the attributes of either of the parents. When our children are born, their hair color will be determined by the DNA that we gave them, and it could differ among the children. Their eye color can differ, and did differ, among our children. Their stature is going to differ among our children. They're going to look a little different, and yet they're going to contain some of the attributes that we have because Judy and I contributed that DNA to them. And that child begins to grow. That child is implanted in the mother, and it begins to grow. From just a single cell, it begins to grow and split and divide in a way that God created to accomplish exactly what God created for it to accomplish. I've never seen 2 human beings come together and produce a puppy, or produce a gorilla, or produce a camel, or a buffalo, or anything like that. Human beings always conceive human beings. And so from the moment that child is conceived, those cells, what you're going to produce, if it goes through the normal pregnancy period, you're going to produce a human child. That's what you're looking for. That's the point of parenthood. You want to have a child that you can raise and that you can nurture. The average pregnancy is 280 days, or equivalent to about 40 weeks. The average human pregnancy is 280 days. As that child begins to develop over that 280 days, at first it's just an embryo, then it begins to divide, and different parts of the division become brain cells and eye cells and toenails and whatever it is. They all know where they're going to be. God planted in those cells that knowledge, and they all form what they're supposed to form, and every time it forms the same way. A child, most of the time with 2 arms and 2 legs, and hopefully a healthy child is going to be just like every other child, that might look a little bit different. 280 days, that woman carries that child. 280 days, she never leaves that child. For 280 days, that child is growing inside of that womb. That child is growing and to the point when it's going to be born. But for 280 days, the mother and the child are inseparable. 280 days, if it lasts that long. I'm just using that for my time frame. This child, as it begins to grow, is growing in a dark, wet place. It's growing in a place where it would be very uncomfortable and unnatural for us now. But having been born there and begin to grow from no consciousness to consciousness, it has no other knowledge of anything except for being inside the mother for those 9 months. That mother then provides food. That mother provides blood to be able to clean the cells of that baby just like with her own cells. That mother provides all the nutrients and everything that child's going to need. That mother's body, as it begins to expand as well, provides protection for that child, a place where it's going to grow. And as long as that mother takes care of herself, that child should be protected by the way that God intended for a child to be protected while it's growing inside of the mother. 280 days, 6,700 and some hours, 403,000 and some minutes. That child is inside that mother. As that child grows, and I've seen it 5 times with Judy and with quite a lot of other women at different times, but when that child grows, I notice several things happen. Mother begins to have more problems as a result of carrying that child. She may have nausea, some kind of sickness. She has days when she just doesn't feel good. She has days when she has weird cravings. She has back pain. Sometimes she can't get up by herself or tie her shoes by herself. And a lot of the things that used to you take for granted, all of a sudden you can't do anymore, simply because you've taken on the responsibility of carrying that child for 280 days. And that child is growing. That child knows absolutely nothing except one thing. In 280 days, that child is going to hear that mother's heartbeat 29 million times in 280 days. 280 days, it may not recognize anything else, but it's going to hear 29 million identical heartbeats, and it's going to recognize that heartbeat. In 280 days, probably 16 or 18 hours a day, that mother's going to be carrying that child, and she's going to be talking to her husband some. She's going to be talking to somebody on the phone. She's going to be talking to the lady at the grocery store, or the lady at Walmart, or wherever it might be, for 16 or 18 hours a day, whether the mother is just sitting there talking to that child that's not born yet, or singing to that child. That's the second thing that child's going to recognize, is that mother's voice. 16 or 18 hours a day, and if she talks in her sleep, maybe longer than that, I don't know, but every day, for hours on end, that child's going to hear a single voice. The child has a father, and if the father lives in the household and they're a married couple and they're happily married, that father goes off and works somewhere, it might be 5 or 6 hours a day that child might hear that father's voice, so it becomes secondary, but it's very secondary to the mother's voice that it hears all the time. In 280 days, that child will never hear the father's heartbeat. The father, with a stethoscope or ultrasound, might hear the baby's heartbeat periodically here, there, and yonder, but the father will never hear the baby's heartbeat, and the baby will never hear the father's heartbeat. It'll only hear his father's voice a couple hours a day until that 280 days is up. Finally, after that mother has grown larger than she probably wants to grow, and that child is heavier than she probably wants to carry that particular time, and she's been through 9 months, and hopefully it's not like I know with my mother. I was born in the end of August, so my mother's last 3 months were June, July, and August, the 3 hottest months of the year, or sometimes they carry them through the 3 coldest months of the year in some places. Sometimes just carrying that baby is a challenge in itself, but then factors around make it even harder. But that woman carries that baby, and she's always looking forward. I've never, ever, ever seen a woman that I know of, and it probably has happened, but for the most part, I've never seen a woman saying, you know what, I just wish this pregnancy would stop and this child would be gone. I'm tired of bothering with it. Never seen that. Once a woman conceives a child, there is an instinct, a natural instinct. I don't know, I get frustrated pretty easy. I might think that way, I don't know, I'm not sure. But I know I've never heard of a mother saying, I wish I didn't have this child just because it's bothering me and I don't want to be this way. Some people are vain and maybe feel that way. Most mothers are going to be careful what they take into their bodies. They're going to eat right, they're going to try to eat what the doctor says, they're going to try to take the vitamins the doctor says, because they're trying to care for a life they've never met before. But they know and they look in anticipation. They live their lives in anticipation of the day when they're no longer carrying that baby inside, but when they're carrying that baby in their arms. And finally, that day comes. I don't know, but I'm going to just guess from the 5 times I was with Judy in labor, that's probably the worst day of a woman's life. It probably is. When you go through labor pains, you have moments of rest, very few, and it gets more and more intense and less times to rest. The labor pains get more intense till finally the doctor says it's time to start pushing, and that's even worse. Now the other aspect of this is inside that mother is a baby who's getting ready to come out. That baby who's lived in a nice enclosed area, who's been able to kick and play and do whatever it wanted to do and live its life, all of a sudden now begins to feel muscular pressure that it's never felt before. All of a sudden now the interior environment around it begins to change suddenly. And all of a sudden that child now that was free inside that mother's womb now is under pressure as it's being born. And I can only imagine that child who's never experienced external stimuli like that and who has no consciousness of what the earth is like, has no earthly idea what's going on, but has to know this hurts, it's scary, maybe for a little bit of time the child can't breathe or whatever it might be, I don't know how, but finally all of a sudden that child is born into the world we live in, and the mother's pain ends. Her fatigue doesn't end right then. I know she's exhausted at that particular time. And that child is brought out. The doctor immediately suctions out the nose and the mouth so the child can breathe. And what does the child do? It screams its head off. I would too if I'd just been drawn out of a real nice environment I was in to all of a sudden go through all the pressure of birth and have to be born into a world where the air conditioner's on and I'm cold and then the doctors are wiping it down, the doctors are suctioning things out of his nose. It's all of a sudden experiencing all kinds of things all at once, and it's probably scaring that child to death. I can just imagine it. Scares that child to death. They wipe that child down, they clean it up, they check it out real quick, and they hand it back to the mother. And she places that baby's head on her chest. 29 million in one, 29 million in two. That baby recognizes that heartbeat. And that mother says, it's all right. There's a voice that baby's heard for the last 200 and some days now. Now that baby's hearing a voice and hearing that heartbeat. The daddy can say, hey little baby, no, go away. I'm happy right here. This is where I need to be. This is where my safety comes. I believe God made it that way. I believe God created the birth process for that same reason. Before that child is introduced to this world, it's going to spend 9 months knowing the one person who's going to love it more than anybody else on earth. My dad told me when I was a boy, and I've said this before, but my dad told me when I was a boy one day, and I never forgot. He said, son, I want to tell you one piece of advice if I could ever give you. You remember that your mother is the best friend you'll ever have on earth. She'll stand beside you when nobody else on earth will stand beside you. She'll have faith in you when the world has lost its faith in you for whatever the reason. She'll be the one always rooting for you and trying to bring you back to where you need to be, the one always trying to protect you. She'll be the one who run out in the yard when the German Shepherd was chasing my sister around the yard one day. That was my mom and her maternal instinct and a broom. This German Shepherd was bad. Lived across the street. It was a mean dog. Hans was his name. Everybody was scared of Hans. And Hans got out one day and come into our yard. My little sister was just a little girl running around the camper trying to get away from Hans, who was trying to attack her. And so Julie said her guardian angel emerged out of the house with a broom in her hand and beat that dog back into its yard. Now I'm going to tell you, not a lot of people take on a German Shepherd, but she did. My mom did, and she won. It's that same instinct from carrying me and all of us for however long she did, that whenever I was sick, it was that same instinct that brought me right back to her. 29 million and 5, 29 million and 6, I was there, and I knew I was where I was secure. It was my mom who laid in bed with me at night. I can remember those times when I was sick, who laid in bed with me at night and held me during the night when she knew I didn't feel good and tried to give me as much comfort as I possibly could. My mom always said, wait till your dad gets home, that was bad. But when mom was home, that was always good. Mom always took care of us. Mom always loved us. Mom was the one who went to the school whenever we had school days and sat with me at my desk when I was in first grade, and I remember eating that we had ice cream. I remember the little cups, and teacher was passing out the ice cream. My mom was squeezing the little desk with me, and that was big stuff. In high school, I didn't want her to be sitting in the desk with me. I was a little more embarrassed then, but when I was in grade school, my mom was there. She cared enough to come, and I appreciate it. I love my mom. She did great things for us as far as I'm concerned. We never did anything extravagant, but my mom always took care of us. I watched as I married Judy and we had 5 children. There are times when, we were talking about this the other day, when Mark was a boy, he had colic, and Mark cried, screamed. And there were times when Mark just wanted to be with Judy. He was a child. I guess he was the first child, and it was kind of different for him perhaps to some degree, but there were times I couldn't handle him. I couldn't stand to be with him. No. Because I'm a man. I don't have maternal instincts. But something about that bond meant that when he was with her, he was happier, and it was easier for her to take care of, but she always did take care of him. I remember when I was a pastor in the first church we pastored and going to Rims. Mark was probably just 2 or 3 years old at the time, maybe. Daniel was a year younger than that, and Andrew wasn't even born. Andrew was born while we were there. But yet every night when I would come home on Wednesday nights, we had 54 miles to drive to get to church on Sunday night, and on any time we went to church, 3 times a week we went to church. 54 miles we had to go. But yet when I would get home in the afternoons from the shipyard, it'd be 6:30. We had to be on the road by, it'd be 6 o'clock. We had to be on the road by 6:30. She'd already have dinner cooked, ready for me. She would have already eaten dinner. She had the boys all clean and ready to go. They were all fed. All the bags were packed and everything. And she'd load the car up and drive, and I'd eat my food on the way to church when we were going there. Now, I'm not making a bragging statement. I'm simply saying there were so many times, I guarantee you, she could have said, I'm not going through this anymore. But she didn't. She stood behind me as a husband and a pastor in a church, and I appreciate that. And at the same time, made sure our children were taken care of. That was the most important thing. I've seen people in our lifetime that have done things to our children, and I would sometimes tell my children, don't tell your mom that because she will find that person, and there's the one person you don't want to mess with is a mother who's had her children messed with in some capacity. She was tenacious in that regard. She was going to take care of her children. I believe every mother does that. There's a love that's instilled. And this passage that we read said, let her own works praise her in the gate. That's the last thing Solomon said. Let her own works praise her in the gates. What are her own works? 5 children. What are Kelly's own works? Avery and Wyatt. What are your own works? Miss Francis, Herman and Graham and Jerry. Those are your own works. Let your children praise you in the gate. Not only praise you, I believe if you raise your children right, they'll become productive, viable parts of a society. And this world needs children who are raised in loving Christian homes. I believe that before you get married, you ought to pray and seek God. And I believe if you seek God, God can do what Match.com and all those other places online cannot do for you. God can provide for you with assurance the very person you need. Now, it might be through that site. I'm not saying anything against it. I'm simply saying that God knows who we need. God knows where they are. God knows how to put us in touch with that person. But when you find the right person as a husband and wife, you find somebody who's strong where you're weak and you're strong where they're weak, and together the two of you can do what both of you could never do alone. God makes that union strong. God blesses that union. And then when you bring children into this world, when you both love God first and then love each other second, when you show the love of God and the love that you have for each other to your children are getting 3 times the love. They're getting God's love, they're getting parents' love for each other, and they're getting the parents' love for their children as well. Their children are growing up in an environment where they know they're nurtured, they know they're loved, they know that they're comfortable, they know that they can sleep in safety at night, they know somebody's going to take care of their needs, somebody is going to be there for them. I told some of the boys the other day, we go through life and there are times when I have a means to be able to meet your need, and there are times sometimes when you have the means to be able to meet my need. Family doesn't mean I owe you something for what you've done. Family means I'll be there for you, and you'll be there for me. That's what it means. I don't have any expectation of a return for anything I do for my children, and I hope my children don't have an expectation of return for anything they do for me. We do what we do. You know, outside of something that's outlandish and you got to pay back a lot of money that you owe or something like that. But for the most part, I know that when my children are in need, that's something that I want to move to do. That's something my wife wanted to do. That's something I know that every mother here, when your child is in need, your instinct from God and your instinct just from that maternal instinct is to move and to accomplish things. Sometimes things that nobody else on earth can accomplish. I say to every mother that's here today, I thank God for you. I thank God for you if you're a Christian especially, and I believe you are. I thank God that you are taking on the role of wife and a mother, but more importantly, that you understand that wife and mother means protector, it means defender, it means instructor, it means a comforter, it means a doctor sometimes or a nurse. There's so many things that we went through when we were growing, when our boys were growing up, that we didn't have the money to be able to go to the doctor sometimes. But we always had people around, my mom and Judy's mom and our grandmothers mostly, and Most of those women, somebody there had been through what you're going through and can tell you exactly what you need to do. And it might be just a household remedy, but they knew the answer and they got things done. Saved us a ton of money sometimes, but whatever the need is, whatever the need arises, God has provided an instinct in each of us. God has provided a calling for the man in the household to be the head of the household, the provider of the household. And according to what Solomon said, in Proverbs here, we just read, the woman takes what is provided for the household and she takes care of her household. She makes it not only take care of the household, but she makes it actually provide more for the household. She works in that capacity. Whatever it takes to make your family strong, whatever it takes to make your family understand who God is, whatever it takes to hold your family together in the deepest times of trouble, that's the instinct that God's placed in every woman who becomes a mother, I believe. There are a lot of women in this world who give birth. And there's a lot of women in this world who are, and men is alike, I'm not just saying not just women, but there are a lot of people who have listened to the most liberal crowds and they have all kind of weird ideas about what a family ought to be. They have all kind of weird ideas about what pregnancy is or what marriage is or all these things. But I'm going to tell you today, if you want the strongest relationships you can have with a husband and wife and the strongest bond you can have with your children, and if you want to produce children that are viable, functional, good, productive elements of society, then the one thing you need more than anything is to go back to the Word of God and find out the way that God laid out the family. God put all this stuff into natural processes into motion when He created the heavens and the earth. God put our drives and our desires into us for a particular reason. God put the motivations that we have into us for whatever the reason. God made a woman able to carry a baby and to give birth for whatever the reason, and a man cannot do that. I don't want to go through the pain. I don't want to go through 9 months of suffering, but I'm going to tell you what. I guess I love the idea of, after a woman going through all of that stuff and the things that I've seen, that you can go through the most pain you'll probably go through in any particular moment in your life, giving birth to that child, and then a minute later it's like, all that's history, all that's important right now is this child. Me, I'd be saying, I need more medicine or whatever. I don't know, I need something a little different than this, but you can take the child in the nursery for a little while. Right now I need some sleep or whatever, but it's never that way. Every woman that I've ever seen right after she had a baby or been in there with different ones, shortly thereafter, it's always about that child and the love they have for that child. God gave us those instincts. God gave us those drives and desires. God gave us the ability to do things that nobody else can do with the children that God provided for us. And I thank God when you find a virtuous woman, because the children that she raises are going to be children who are going to know what it means to love God. They're going to know what it means to study and understand God's Word. They're going to know what it means to be a part of family and what family means. They're going to know what it means to have respect for people. Our children go out in the world, and a lot of times people come back and say to us, you know what, you've got the nicest children. They're always so polite, they're always so helpful or whatever. I thank God for that. Not just our children, all of your children. I know the same thing, but the point I'm making is when those words come back, you know that you've done something right in this life to produce a child that the world recognizes is a functional part of society, a good part of society. So I'm going to close by just saying to you today, I thank God for my mother. She's gone on to heaven now for several years now. My dad for many years more than that. But I thank God that God gave me my mother. I thank God that God gave me my father and my brother that passed on. I carry him around in my Bible all the time. And I wish, like that song said, I'm going to see my mother again. I know she's waiting for me. I wish she was here right now and I could sit down and talk with her again. I miss that. I tell people all the time, I see people that fuss with their parents or whatever, and I'll say, you know what? You better recognize what you've got here now, because before long it's going to be gone. And when it's gone, when your mother's gone, you're not going to have that opportunity anymore. You're going to wish for it, but you're never going to have it again. Seize the opportunities that you have. Today is the day. We're not going to have a service here tonight, but today is the day we're going to let you go and just go and enjoy the time you spend with your mother, spend time with your family, with your children, whatever it is. Make sure you understand today the importance, not just on Mother's Day or Father's Day, but every day, of what a great gift our families actually are. And they are, if we are children of God, those families that we have are gifts from God. Amen. I was telling somebody yesterday, when I used to work for Publix the first time, there was a man named Bob Moore, and he was the third highest man in Publix. And he came down one day when Publix first came to South Carolina. There were a lot of ambitious people who wanted to move up and get positions. They would do anything. They work all times of the day and night. And Bob Moore saw that. This is the third highest ranking guy in Publix, I believe, at the time. And he came and he spoke to us and he said, you know what, you got your priorities wrong, and I want to tell you what my priorities are. Now this is one of the top men in the entire supermarket chain. And he said, I'm going to tell you what my priorities are. And he did just like this. This is my first priority. This is God. Yep. There is but one God. Can't find another God because there is not another God. My second priority in life is my family. God gave me my family. I don't want another family. It's the best family I could ask for because God gave it to me. Publix is down here. That's what he said. Publix is a job. I can find another job, but this job will never stand in the way of my relationship with my family or my relationship with God. When you have your priorities that set, and you're the top man in the company, and you can say this company is not going to interfere with my God or my family, then you've got your priorities, I believe, where they need to be. Nothing in this life is more important than the family God gave you. Nothing will be more benefit or value to you than the mother God gave you. If you cherish your mom, the Bible says, honor your father and your mother. It doesn't necessarily just mean do what they say. Live a life that brings honor to the raising that your mother and father gave you, and let people know they must have been great people because of the people they produce.